Good morning and welcome to our live coverage as we come on the air with breaking news. Overnight, an American Airlines passenger flight crashed midair with an Army helicopter here in the Washington, D.C. area. Video captured by EarthCam shows the moment of collision over the Potomac River. It happened just before 9 p.m. Eastern near Regan National Airport, just minutes from where we are here in the studio. The plane departed from Wichita, Kansas, with 60 passengers and 4 crew members on board. Officials say the Black Hawk helicopter was coming from Fort Belvoir and had 3 people on board for that. An Army official tells NBC News it's believed they were on a training flight. Search and rescue operations are now underway, and this is a live look from outside of Regan National Airport, where first responders are dealing with difficult conditions between the wind, the dark, and the cold. As of now, no survivors have been found. NBC Washington reports at least 12 bodies have been recovered. They're citing 2 sources familiar with the search efforts. Overnight, U.S. figure skating confirmed several of its members were on board this American Airlines flight. The organization says athletes, coaches, and family members were returning home from the National Development Camp that was held in conjunction with the skating championships in Wichita. Meanwhile, Regan National Airport is expected to be closed until at least 11 a.m. this morning. Takeoffs and landings were halted around 9 p.m. shortly after the crash. Joining us now from Alexandria, Virginia, along the Potomac River, is our NBC News correspondent, Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, what's the latest that you're seeing on the ground? I can see the lights and sirens behind you.
Yeah, Allie, there is still an active search and rescue effort happening here along the Potomac River. We are just south of Regan National Airport, where there is no access. As I drove along the GW Park, the George Washington Parkway here this morning, you could see all the points where you could access the airport are blocked by law enforcement officers. And this is still, according to officials in this area, this is a joint operation that's being led by D.C. Fire and EMS along with D.C. Police, and then several agencies from Virginia and from Maryland have engaged as well to help to execute this search effort, along with federal partners and state partners, we should say, too. At this point, as you noted, we know that there's a report from sources familiar that 12 bodies have been recovered of the 67 that were on the aircraft that went into the water around 9 o'clock last night. That's from 2 sources familiar, according to our NBC4 affiliate here in Washington. You may still be able to hear the helicopter. There's at least one that's flying overhead here with a bright spotlight on the water. As we understand, there have been about 300 rescuers, first responders that have been participating in this effort since about 9 o'clock last night, still trying to find people who went into the water when that Black Hawk helicopter collided with this 60-seat passenger jet right here in the Potomac River late last night. And so, as we understand it, there will be another briefing around 7:30 this morning. We expect to potentially learn more. The question was put to D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser last night about how many people survived, how many people had perished, and it wasn't a question that the mayor was willing to answer. She clearly did not want to answer that question directly, and so, Allie, that's something we're hoping to get some clarity on this morning. It's hard to believe, as you noted, with the cold water conditions, the amount of time that these aircraft and those people have been in the water. It's hard to imagine that there could be many survivors, but there is still hope. There is still technically a search and rescue, not recovery, search and rescue effort that's going on here.
Yeah, and just to orient our viewers as to where Regan National is, you know this area so well, having been a local reporter here, Aaron, before joining us at NBC News here. But this is an airport that is just across the river from where we are in D.C. When you talk about Regan National, this is an airport that you, I, all of us fly into all the time, technically in Virginia, but this, where the plane was landing, the fact that they landed in the Potomac after this crash, that's the water approach that we all make when we fly into Regan. This is within view of the Capitol. You can see the Washington Monument. It's very, very close to Washington, D.C. This is not some far off airport. The fact that when I was coming into work this morning, could hear some of those helicopters that I now hear in the background of your live shot, again, for viewers, just gives you the proximity of what we're talking about here. What else are you seeing, Aaron? I know that we were talking about how the cold and the dark are a condition making it so much more difficult for first responders who are fanned out trying to rescue anyone that might be in the water. But ice is also a really big condition that they're battling in the water. Talk about, I know it's between 5 and 8 feet of water there in the Potomac, but just talk about what else you're seeing by way of the rescue operation.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see anything because it's so dark. And obviously, we have lights here so we can illuminate where we are. And there's, as we noted, a helicopter that's flying overhead with a bright spotlight as well. The boats that are in the water have lights, but it's still incredibly dark out here. Pitch black if you didn't have that extra illumination. That makes things more difficult for the divers who are going into the water. The Potomac River isn't known as a sort of a clear water body here. And so it's difficult to see into that water as well. You noted the fact that there's been ice on the river. You'll remember, was it just last week when the presidential inaugural events were moved indoors because it was so cold? It has warmed up a bit over the last couple of days, and so the ice has not been as thick and vicious as it had been, but still a complication for the divers that are having to go into the water or have been going into the water for the last several hours. As you noted, you can't help but to note that this airport sits on the river. And because you can't fly, for the most part, you can't fly over the District of Columbia because of restricted airspace there. Most aircraft that are coming into Reagan National approach from the south or they approach from the north. There are just a couple of runways at Reagan National. And this American Airlines small passenger plane was coming on, we believe, coming from the south up the Potomac River to land on the runway that sort of runs not necessarily perpendicular to the other runways, but it crosses one of the longer runways here. And the directly across the river, you have Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. It's an Air Force facility where aircraft can take off from. But there are so many others. There's a Coast Guard station right up the river from where we are. Fort Belvoir, we know, is south of here, and that's where that Black Hawk helicopter came from. This airport is just a stone's throw from the Pentagon, and so there's a lot of activity, military aircraft activity that happens in this region, along with all of the commercial planes that come in and out of Reagan National, Alley.
Yeah, and definitely one of the most controlled airspaces in the country, given the fact that this is our nation's capital. NBC's Aaron Gilchrist, thank you for joining us. We're going to come back with you later this